There is a kind of person who walks into a room and changes it, not because they are loud, not because they demand attention, not because they wear power like a costume stitched together from arrogance and noise. No, they change it because of what they refuse to do. They refuse to react. They refuse to collapse. They refuse to be moved by the chaos that bends everyone else at the knee, and the world, whether it admits it or not, fears that person. Throughout history, the greatest warriors, emperors, and philosophers understood something the masses never grasped. True danger is not found in the man who screams. It is found in the man who is silent when everyone else is screaming. This is not a coincidence. This is philosophy forged in fire. This is Stoicism. And today, we are going to uncover 5 behaviors, 5 quiet, devastating behaviors that emerge when a human being masters this ancient way of life. These are not tricks. These are not performances. These are the natural consequences of an inner transformation, so complete, so ruthless in its discipline, that the world has no choice but to take notice. Sit with this, because what follows is not merely information. It is a mirror. Behavior 1. They never explain themselves to people who have already decided. There is a particular kind of weakness that has infected modern humanity. It is the obsessive, almost feverish need to be understood, to be validated, to explain, justify, and defend every decision, every silence, every choice, as if our worth is determined by the verdict of people who were never qualified to judge us in the first place. The Stoics seize this trap clearly, and they refuse to walk into it. Marcus Aurelius, a man who commanded the greatest empire the world had ever known, who faced senators plotting against him, generals questioning him, and an entire civilization watching his every move, wrote in his private journal words that were never meant for another soul. Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect. He did not perform his virtue. He cultivated it in silence. Here is the brutal truth that Stoicism forces us to confront. When we rush to explain ourselves, we are not seeking understanding. We are seeking approval. And the moment we need another person's approval to feel certain about our own path, we have handed them power over us that they should never have been given. Epictetus, a man who was born into slavery and still became one of the most formidable minds in human history, understood this with extraordinary clarity. He had every reason to beg the world to see him differently. Instead, he said, "Seek not the good in external things, seek it in yourself." When you stop explaining yourself to those who have already decided who you are, something remarkable happens. The energy you once spent defending your reputation becomes energy directed inward, toward growth, toward discipline, toward the quiet construction of a self that requires no defense. This is what makes the Stoic dangerous. Not aggression, not defiance, but the devastating calm of someone who knows exactly who they are and does not need a single other person on this earth to confirm it. We live in a world addicted to justification. The person who breaks that addiction, who walks in silence, acts with purpose, and lets their life speak without a lawyer, stands apart from the crowd, like iron in a field of sand, and the crowd feels it, even if they cannot name it. Behavior 2. They control their reactions like their life depends on it, because it does. Consider this for a moment. Every single day the world throws its chaos at us. Provocations, insults, disappointments, people who push, test and prod, sometimes deliberately, sometimes without even knowing it. And the vast majority of humanity does the same thing every single time. They react immediately, instinctively, like a puppet whose strings are being pulled by whoever happens to be standing closest. The Stoics identified this as one of the most dangerous forms of slavery imaginable, not chains on the body, but chains on the mind. Epictetus wrote with devastating precision, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." But deeper than gratitude, he taught us something more urgent. Between the event and the response, there is a space, and in that space lives our entire freedom. The Stoics called it the pause. We call it self-mastery. When someone provokes you and you do not flinch, when the insult lands and your face remains still, when the bad news arrives and you breathe instead of break, you do something extraordinary. You reveal that you cannot be controlled, and a person who cannot be controlled cannot be weaponized, cannot be manipulated, cannot be defeated through emotion alone. Seneca, who advised emperors and stared death in the face with composure, warned us, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Most of our explosive reactions are not responses to what actually happened. They are responses to the story we instantly, furiously constructed around what happened. The Stoic refuses that story. They choose instead to see clearly, breathe deliberately, and respond, if they respond at all, from a place of intention rather than ignition. This is not coldness. This is not the absence of feeling. It is something far more formidable. It is feeling everything and choosing your response anyway. The world will always try to pull us into its disorder. The Stoic stands at the edge of that storm, feeling its wind, acknowledging its fury, and does not move. That stillness is not weakness dressed up in silence. That stillness is the most dangerous thing in the room. Behavior 3. They embrace hardship as if they chose it. Most people run from difficulty. They negotiate with it, complain about it, and spend enormous amounts of energy trying to build a life so comfortable, so insulated from pain, that hardship can never find the front door. The Stoic does the opposite, not because they enjoy suffering, but because they understand something about it that the comfort-seeking world refuses to accept. Hardship is not the enemy of a good life. It is the good life. It is the forge, and without the forge, there is no steel. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while battling chronic illness, personal loss, and wars that never seemed to end. He did not ask the universe for relief. Instead, he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Read that again. Let it settle. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is not motivational decoration. This is a complete restructuring of how we relate to every obstacle, every failure, every moment of grinding, relentless difficulty that life places in our path. The Stoics practiced something called amor fati, love of fate, not tolerance of fate, not reluctant acceptance of fate, but an active, almost ferocious embrace of everything that happens, including the worst of it. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." We live in a civilization that has made an idol of comfort. Convenience is worshipped. Ease is the highest aspiration. And yet the people we most deeply respect, the ones whose names echo through centuries, were forged almost entirely in difficulty. When we begin to embrace hardship not as punishment, but as curriculum, something in us shifts permanently. We stop being victims of our circumstances and become, quietly and without announcement, something the world rarely sees, someone who cannot be broken by it. Behavior 4. They speak little, but every word lands like a verdict. There is a particular kind of silence that unsettles people, not the silence of someone with nothing to say, but the silence of someone who has chosen, deliberately, consciously, to say nothing until what they say is worth hearing. This distinction is everything, and the Stoic lives inside it completely. We exist in an era of relentless noise. Everyone is speaking, everyone is broadcasting, everyone is filling every available moment of silence with words, opinions, and declarations, as if silence itself were something shameful to be covered up. as if the absence of noise were an admission of emptiness. The Stoic knows the opposite to be true. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism himself, reportedly said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen twice as much as we speak." This was not advice about politeness. It was a philosophy of power, because the person who listens, who truly, patiently listens while everyone else performs, is gathering something invaluable. They are gathering understanding, clarity, precision, and when they finally speak, the room feels it. Epictetus taught that we must constantly guard the gate of our own mouth, not out of timidity, but out of respect for the weight that words carry when they are not cheapened by overuse. Every unnecessary word we speak dilutes the ones that matter. Every impulsive declaration weakens the architecture of our credibility. When we learn to sit comfortably inside silence, to let others rush to fill it while we remain still and observant, we develop a presence that most people spend their entire lives unknowingly chasing. Words become rare, and rare things carry weight. The Stoic does not speak to be heard. They speak to be precise. And that precision, that quiet, unhurried deliberateness, reads to the world as something remarkably close to authority. Behavior 5. They have already made peace with the worst possible outcome. This is the behavior that separates the Stoic from everyone else, completely, irrevocably. Most people move through life carrying an invisible but crushing weight, the weight of everything they are afraid to lose. Their reputation, their relationships, their comfort, their safety, and because they are so terrified of losing these things, they can be controlled by anyone who threatens them. They bend, they compromise, they silence themselves. They become, without ever realizing it, prisoners of their own attachments. The Stoic has already been to the darkest room and sat with what they found there. This practice, one of the most powerful and misunderstood in all of Stoic philosophy, is called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It is the deliberate, unflinching contemplation of everything that could go wrong: loss, failure, humiliation, death itself, not as an act of pessimism, not as surrender to despair, but as an act of profound liberation. Seneca wrote with characteristic devastation, "Rehearse death." To say this is to tell a person to rehearse his freedom. A person who has learned how to die has unlearned how to be a slave. Feel the weight of that. When we sit quietly with the possibility of losing everything we love, when we hold it, examine it, and make our peace with it, something extraordinary happens. The fear loses its teeth. The threat loses its power. And the person standing before us trying to manipulate us through that fear finds themselves holding a weapon that no longer works. This is why the Stoic appears dangerous, not because they are reckless, but because they are free, genuinely, structurally, philosophically free, in a way that cannot be revoked by circumstance, by failure, or by the cruelty of other people. Marcus Aurelius faced plague, betrayal, and the slow destruction of everything he built. He wrote, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." He was not pretending. He had done the inner work. He had already made peace with the ground falling away beneath him, and that unshakable readiness is what we must all pursue with everything we have, because the world cannot intimidate a person who has already faced the worst within themselves and decided to keep walking anyway. That person is not merely strong, that person is untouchable.